Hello, boys and girls. I'm back with another video series for Ruth in the Green Book. So I'm doing these video series to really help you guys think about the text. Remember, we're looking at historical fiction. What's historical fiction? It's a story. It's not real, but it has elements of realism. It takes place in the past, a certain time period. Um, some of the events could have happened, but they've been dramatized. They've been fictionalized somewhat. The characters, Ruth and her family, they weren't actual people um, that we can look up and find, but they represented an African American family that could have lived in the 1950s during a time of Jim Crow in the South, and we talked about Jim Crow yesterday. These wasn't an actual person. Jim Crow was a series of laws that segregated both African Americans and whites, and oftentimes African Americans were treated as second-class citizens. They were treated unfairly. They were given the poorest selections of things in life. They went to poorer schools. The bathrooms were dirtier. They had to drink from water fountains that were either more broken down or not as clean. This is what life was like. It was like living in separate societies, and it took place more in the South than it did in the North. Ruth's family, as you know, is from Chicago. They're traveling to the South to visit Ruth's grandmother. And along the way, they stopped at a Esso gas station. And we talked about how the gas attendant gave Ruth's family a green book. And the green book was a list of establishments like restaurants, hotels, gas stations where African American families could safely go and avoid conflict from places that wouldn't sell to them. So let's look at the questions for today. Two questions. Now remember, when you answer these questions, I'm looking for a complete response. 3 to 4 sentences. Okay, I'm not looking for a sentence, not even 2 sentences. I want you to provide some details. And these questions really get you to think about the text more deeply. So you're not just regurgitating answers from the text. You need to go beyond it. So let's talk about question 9 first, give you some thoughts about it, and then you're going to go and reread or listen to the story. So number 9, Eddie tells Ruth's father that things might become dangerous as the family drives south. What might have happened if the family had not learned about the Esso stations in the Greenberg? Give specific examples. So this is one of those what if scenarios, cause and effect. We know that in the story, so let's go to the story here, that the family actually did go to the Esso station and they were given a copy of the Green Book. So I want you to imagine what might have happened if they had not learned about the Esso stations and the Green Book and they were traveling south. Well, if the Green Book had list of restaurants and hotels and places where African American families could go safely, if they didn't have information like that and they kept traveling south, eventually they're going to have to make stops, right? They're going to have to get more gas. They're going to need a place to stay. They're going to need to eat. What if they went to the wrong restaurant or the wrong hotel where they didn't serve black families? What if they went to a town that wasn't friendly to African Americans? You don't know about this, but in history there were towns called sunset towns, and sunset towns meant that if you were a person of color, a black person, and you were in that town, they expected you to leave before the sun went down. And if you didn't, that would be trouble for you and your family. So think about what might have happened to the family if they didn't learn about those stations. I want you to think deeply about that. And like I said, the answer is not going to be in the text, but there might be some clues. If you go back and think about Jim Crow, think about some of those laws, but give specific examples, okay? For number 10, why doesn't Miss Melody take any money from Ruth's parents to stay at her home? What does Ruth mean when she says she's going to do the same one day? So, boys and girls, this kind of question, once again, you're not going to find the answer directly in the text, but just look at the text. Let's go and learn about that event when they come to see Miss Melody. So I'll read this section to you, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Mama read about a place nearby called a tourist home where we could stay for the last night of our trip. Daddy called ahead, and sure enough, the lady told us to come right away. Then Mama gave me the green book and said I was in charge of keeping it. I couldn't stop reading it. All those places in all those states where we could go and not worry about being turned away. We reached the tourist home in the early evening. Mrs. Melody, the owner, gave us a big smile when she opened the door. It was like coming home. That's an interesting statement. It was like coming home. Think about all the problems they endured in the beginning when they were traveling. And now they came to a place where it was like coming home. And how do you think they knew about this place? From the Green Book. That's right. So let's keep reading. And she wouldn't even let Daddy pay her. Interesting. So not only was it like coming home, but the Miss Melody, who was the owner of the establishment, wouldn't even let her daddy pay to stay there. It's like staying there for free. She said she welcomed Negro travelers because it was right to help each other out. I'm going to do the same one day. And I'm going to do the same one day, and is what Ruth says. Ruth is telling this story. This entire story is told from her perspective. Okay, remember that. She's telling the story. So, why doesn't Miss Melody take any money from Ruth's parents to stay at her home? Well, you got some clues there. They did kind of hint as to why, but I want you to go beyond that. Think about what kind of person Miss Melody is. Think about what she said about welcoming black African American travelers. Think about the time period, 1950s. You're in the South, Jim Crow South. It's not safe for everyone, for black families to travel in the South. And if you didn't have a place to go or new safe places to go, like Miss Melody's, think about what they might have endured or what they would have encountered. And then the last part is, what does Ruth mean when she says she's going to do the same one day? Okay, think about what Ruth is saying. Think about what Ruth has learned so far in her travels. Remember, she's a young girl. She's never really traveled to the South like this, so she's seeing things that she hasn't seen for the first time. Think about what she's saying there. These are inferencing questions, meaning that based on the clues, based on what you've learned about what the characters are saying and what you've learned about the story, what ideas can you come up with? So I'm looking for a detailed response. Please reach out to me if you have questions. We can discuss it together, and we'll talk more about this book next week. Bye now.